Okay, so good morning to all of you. Today I am going to discuss about the hyperspectral imaging in urban planning. Okay, hyperspectral imaging is very important in urban planning and urban mapping. It's a different kind of technique in comparison to the optical remote sensing. Okay, either it is a optical or hyperspectral. Both are using same kind of optic this solar radiation for getting the information, but hyperspectral is little bit different from the optical remote sensing. So today we are going to discuss hyperspectral imaging, what is hyperspectral sensors, what are the characteristics of hyperspectral images, and how it will be working in urban planning and urban mapping. So before starting, first we need to know what is hyperspectral remote sensing. So it is a remote sensing technology. It's very well known that hyperspectral is a remote sensing technology, and it characterizes any object that is not recognized by the human eye. And this electromagnetic spectrum is very well known. All the wavelengths starting from gamma rays, ultraviolet, visible, infrared, microwaves, radio waves. Okay, this is the electromagnetic spectrum. So entire electromagnetic spectrum is divided into different wavelength intervals, starting from shorter wavelengths of gamma rays to the longer wavelength, that is radio waves. Okay, so these electromagnetic spectrum having different spectral information about any object. Okay, and when we are using spectral information, definitely by using that spectral information, we will get the characteristics, we will get the composition of the material, we will get the composition and properties of the earth surface features. Okay, so hyperspectral can provide you such a information which cannot be recognized by human eyes, because our human eyes are only sensitive to the visible portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. We cannot detect infrared, we cannot detect ultraviolet, we cannot detect gamma rays. Okay, so hyperspectral sensors or hyperspectral remote sensing provides you much more detailed information about the characteristics and composition of different earth surface features. Okay, so now why we use hyperspectral remote sensing, how it is different from multispectral. So a hyperspectral remote sensing having narrow spectral bands in comparison to the multispectral bands, and it offers the ability to separate community level species type of different land cover features. Hyperspectral also provides the subtle spectral signature that from the not possible because of the multispectral broader wavelengths in the multispectral images. So hyperspectral provides subtle spectral signature or the curves of terrestrial target. Using hyperspectral makes it easier to unmix the pixels, thus improving the confidence in the classification results. So whatever the data we are getting, like in case of hyperspectral or in case of multispectral, we are actually getting the spectral response. So that spectral response have the information about that object. In hyperspectral, we use very narrow spectral bands so that we can get more improved information in comparison to the multispectral band. Multispectral, generally in multispectral, we use 4, 5, 10, 8 bands, 10 bands, 12 bands. But in hyperspectral, we are having a number of narrow bands that can be ranging from 17 spectral bands to 200 spectral bands. That's why it is known as continuous imaging. Continuous means in multispectral we are having broader wavelength intervals, but in hyperspectral we are having continuous wavelength intervals, having different wavelength, having different spectral bands, and that may be 17, 100, 200, 220, and so on. Okay, so hyperspectral remote sensing can also work as a non-imaging system. Non-imaging system means the non-imaging instruments or non-imaging system are the systems that can provide you only the data, not any images. So hyperspectral sensors, some kind of hyperspectral sensors are non-imaging sensors. They only provide you the data in the form of quantity, or they can only provide you the quantitative information, like field spectroradiometer. This is a spectroradiometer, and a spectroradiometer is a hyperspectral imaging sensor that can provide you only the quantitative information. It doesn't provide you any image. It only provides you the quantitative information in terms of values. That's why it is known as non-imaging instrument. So hyperspectral can work in both ways, imaging and non-imaging. In imaging way, we can have the images, but in non-imaging ways, we cannot have images. We just have the information. We can just have the quantity, that is reflected energy. Okay. So spectroradiometer is a non-imaging hyperspectral instrument that can provide you the quantitative information about different Earth surface features. So this is the spectral radiance, spectral response curve. This is the spectral response curve of the different Earth surface features in the multispectral band. Okay, this multispectral band is having different wavelength intervals starting from 484, 468, 671, 784.4. Okay, so depending on the spectral response curve of different objects, we may get the information what kind of image is there, what kind of feature is there. So here we are using multispectral band. Multispectral band is having only 4 spectral bands, that is blue, green, red, and NIR. So when you see the spectral response in 4 bands, you can have such kind of graph. Okay, it's a kind of flat graph, flat curve. Okay, you can have the information but not much detailed information. But when we move to the hyperspectral, you can see here we are having total number of bands increased in comparison to the multispectral band. Here we are having 484, 529, then 568, 606, 637, 671 nanometer, 698 nanometer, 671 nanometer. Means the entire wavelength interval is divided into narrow wavelength intervals. Here in multispectral, we are having only 4 spectral bands: 484, 468, 671, and 784 nanometers. But in hyperspectral, we subcategorize, we divide this spectral band into more number of spectral bands that will provide you the more detailed information, more detailed spectral response of different or surface features. So here you can see the curve is not having the flat line. The curve is not having the exact flat linear line. It is having some upcoming downward and upward this curve. Okay, means some are having the good spectral response, some are having the less spectral response, depending on the information. On the basis of the spectral response of different objects, you may have different characteristics, different composition of the Earth surface features. Okay, so and for imaging system, as all we know that all the imaging system having 2 kinds of processes, 2 kinds of mechanism. That mechanism is push broom, or you can say along track and across track scanners. So hyperspectral works in non-imaging way, and it works as also work as imaging ways. Imaging system means the imaging system can provide you the images. The sensors that can provide you the images are known as imaging sensors or imaging systems. So imaging sensors can work in 2 different ways: along track and across track scanner. Long track, across track are very well known to you. Okay, these are 2 kinds of scanning mechanism that is used by different type of satellites. Imaging system is also having this kind of mechanism to get the information about the Earth surface feature. It scans the entire area in 2 different ways, either in across track or along track motion. Okay, so this is very well discussed. This is very well known to you what is along track and what is across track scanners. So I'm not going in detail. Okay, so in the next slide, here you see the spectral response curve. Or there are different bands: band 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Okay, so each and every wavelength will have different spectral response depending on the energy which is reflected or absorbed by the Earth surface feature. Some part of the energy is absorbed by some wavelength, some part of the energy is uh, reflected by Earth surface. So depending on the composition, depending on the property of different Earth surface features, we may have different wavelength, we may have different kinds of spectral response. So here in this figure, you can see we are having different kinds of spectral response. The curve is showing the peak and valley configuration. Peak means higher reflectance, valley means low reflectance, or you can say absorption. Depending on different wavelengths, depending on different wavelength intervals, we may have different kinds of spectral response. Okay. Now moving to next slide, hyperspectral remote sensing, how it is different from multispectral. Multispectral having different bands, but these bands are discrete. And in case of hyperspectral, we are having a large number of continuous bands. The bands are continuous. Difference, the major difference between multispectral and hyperspectral is that multispectral bands are discrete. Discrete means they are having certain range, they are having certain wavelength interval. But in case of hyperspectral, they are having continuous bands. Means there is no gap between two spectral bands. All the spectral bands are continuously arranged on the electromagnetic spectrum. So this is about the difference that of that multispectral and hyperspectral remote sensing. Both are having optical data, both are having the utility of solar radiation, but multispectral having discrete wavelength bands, and the number of bands will be less, whereas in hyperspectral remote sensing we are having continuous bands. There will be no gap between two bands. Suppose in multispectral we are using blue, green, red. So the wavelength interval of blue is zero point 0.4 to zero point 0.5. Then the green is 0.6, 0.6, 0.5 to zero point 0.6, and red is 0.6 to zero point 0.7. So between 0.5 to 0.6, there is a gap. But in hyperspectral, there is no gap. It starts from 0.51, 0.52, 0.53, 0.54, 0.55, 0.56. In this way, it's a continuous arrangement of the bands. That's why it is known as continuous bands. Whereas in multispectral, we are having a certain range, 0.4 to zero point 0.5. Then next band will start from 0.6 to zero point 0.7. So 0.5 to zero point 0.6, in between this, we may have discrete band. We may have less or no information, but hyperspectral having this information in the form of continuous spectral bands. So hyperspectral remote sensing provides a continuous, essentially complete record of the multispectral response of the materials over the wavelengths that are under consideration. Okay, so discrete and continuous, you have to remember these two terms. Multispectral is discrete, having some certain range, having some certain wavelength band, whereas hyperspectral having continuous bands. There is no gap between two multispectral bands. So that's why the number of bands is very high in hyperspectral in comparison to the multispectral bands. Moving to the next slide, there are several hyperspectral platforms are now available. It was started in 1982. The first hyperspectral sensor that was launched in 1982, it was Airborne Imaging Spectrometer, AIS. It was the first hyperspectral sensor that was launched in 1982. After that, in 1987, Everest sensor was launched. Its full form is Airborne Visible Infrared Imaging Spectrometer. Okay. Then in 1995, another hyperspectral sensor named as HIDICE, Hyperspectral Digital Imagery Collection Experiment. HIDICE sensor was launched in 1995, and in 2000, Hyperion sensor was launched by NASA, and two it is having two sensors, Hyperion and EO1. These are the two sensors. Okay, Hyperion. EO1 is a satellite, Hyperion is a sensor. It was launched in 2000 by the NASA, United USGS, in collaboration with the NASA. These are the hyperspectral sensors, and it was started in 1982, and till now we are having very less number of hyperspectral sensors. So this is the major constant in case of hyperspectral remote sensing, because we don't have much number of hyperspectral sensors in comparison to the optical sensors. More, in case of optical remote sensing or multispectral remote sensing, we may have we may have many spectral bands, we may have many images freely available. But in case of hyperspectral remote sensing, most of the sensors are not freely available. Hyperion was freely available, but right now it is not working. It is not in the function. Okay, Hyperion sensor was not working, is not working till now, so that there is a limitation of the availability of hyperspectral images. So this is the sensor of Everest. This is the Everest sensor. This is the figure showing the Everest sensor, and this is the internal structure of the Everest sensor. You may have this. There are maybe different kinds of complexities, different kinds of internal structure of the Everest sensor. Okay, so Everest was very famous when it was launched. It was one of the widely used sensor at the time because it is having 24 to 24 individual CCDs. 224 individual CCDs means it is having total 224 bands, because we know that for each band there may be a individual detector. A detector is only sensitive to a individual band. Okay, for blue band there will be blue detector, for green band there will be green detector. So for every wavelength there may be the individual detectors, that is known as charged coupled devices, CCDs. Okay, so every sensor is having 224 spectral bands, and for each spectral band there are individual CCDs of the number 224. The spectral resolution is about 10 nanometers, means each wavelength interval is about 10 nanometer. The two wavelengths having the range between the 10 nanometers, and the spatial resolution is about 20 meter. Okay, and the flight platform, the platform used for every sensor is NASA ER2. Okay, and its altitude is around 20,000 to 60,000, but usually flown at 60,000. Okay, it's not kilometer, it's feet. Okay, this is in the feet, 20,000 feet to 60,000 feet, and its swath is around 11 kilometer. Swath is the area that is covered on the earth surface by the sensor. So its swath is around 11 kilometer, and dispersion of the spectrum are against the detector array accomplished with the differencing grating. There maybe the total interval reaches from 380 to 250 nanometers. The wavelength interval ranging from 380 to 200 500 nanometers. Means you can see this continuous arrangement of the spectral bands starting from 381, 382, 383, 384, 385 up to 2500 nanometers. Okay, it's a post-Brom image. Okay, post-Brom means a long track scanner. It is using a long track scanner or post-Brom sensor. Okay, and it contains only 664 pixels. These are some specifications of the Everest sensor. Okay, so Everest was very famous. It was widely used for different applications when it was launched in 1987. Now moving to the next slide. Yeah, this is the this figure is showing what is the spectral response curve of different objects. It was developed by JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory. It's a part of NASA. So here you see spectral response curve of different Earth surface features when we observe it in Everest data, Everest image. So soil is having, you can say soil is having different wavelength interval, having different spectral response, water having different spectral response, vegetation having different spectral response. So uh, each and every object having different spectral response depending on its composition. And it's very well known in optical sensor also. In multispectral, it is also very well known to that soil, water, vegetation having different types of spectral pattern. Okay, but here in case of Everest, we are having continuous spectral bands. We are having more detailed information in comparison to the multispectral bands, because here we are having 224 bands. So 224 bands is better in comparison to 10 bands of multispectral sensor. Okay, so in case of soil, you can see this is a very fine curve having the reflectance showing peak and valley configuration. Then in case of water, you can see here around 500 nanometer, it's having some reflectance. Then in case of vegetation, it is having higher reflectance in case of an IR wavelength. Then again it starts absorbing the signal. Okay, in visual it is having less reflectance, but when we go in an IR band, vegetation having higher reflectance. So on the basis of a spectral response curve, you can easily analyze different kinds of Earth surface features. And if here we are using 224 spectral bands, so 224 spectral bands images will provide you the discrimination of different vegetation. You can easily discriminate different types of vegetation. You can easily discriminate different types of forest, because you are getting more information in comparison to the multispectral bands. Multispectral is having only an IR band. Okay, multispectral provides you the data about vegetation in an IR band only. The range of an IR is 3 to 14 micrometer. But in case of hyperspectral, we are getting information about the vegetation in an IR band, and that will be ranging from 3 to 14 micrometer, but it will be continuous: 3, 3.1, then 3.2, 3.3, 3.4, and so on. So you will get more detailed information about the vegetation type, different types of species, different types of forest type, and different types of minerals. You can also detect, you can also discriminate different types of minerals using spectral response of different objects. It's and the data collected by the hyperspectral sensor is also known as hyperspectral cube, because it shows the volume of the data that is returned by the imaging instrument. It's also known as hyperspectral cube because we are getting large volume of data set. We are having 224 bands. 224 bands means large volume of data. That's why it can be considered as a hyperspectral cube. It illustrates how the data from imaging instrument is georeferenced and data from different wavelengths that can be used to create a map in either true color or false color. Okay, so you can also visualize your hyperspectral images in true color and false color also. The concept is same. What is the difference between false color? What is the difference between true color? The concept is same as the multispectral. Okay, and that's why here we are getting the more number of bands, like 224 bands. That's why it is known as hyperspectral cube. Hyperspectral cube means a large volume of data that is compressed, that is composed in a image. Okay, that's why it is known as hyperspectral cube. So here you can see the variation, you can see the spectral response. Okay, so the change in the spectral response will get to know the different types of objects. Here in the first figure, there are two minerals, dolomite and calcimite. Dolomite and calcite. Okay, so dolomite and calcite will be differentiated on the basis of its spectral response. You can see here dolomite having different spectral response, calcite having different spectral response. So by analyzing the spectral response, by analyzing the reflectance or absorption of different wavelength bands by the minerals, you can easily discriminate, you can easily identify what kind of mineral is there. Okay, here in second figure you can see in visible near infrared range, water ice and dry ice can be separated by using spectral response curve. Okay, water ice and dry ice, suppose if you are working on the glaciers and if you want to discriminate between water ice and dry ice, you want to discriminate these two kind of ice. So for that you need to study the spectral curve of different wavelengths for these two objects, water ice and dry ice, and depending on its spectral response, depending on its reflectance pattern, you can easily analyze, you can easily discriminate these two features. Okay, so more detailed information means more easily discrimination of different objects. This is all about the hyperspectral remote sensing and this continuous wavelength intervals. Okay, so hyperspectral data analysis includes different components. Okay, when we are going to analyze hyperspectral data, when we are going to study the hyperspectral images, so it is having different components. So first we need to develop a spectral library. A spectral library means we are collecting the spectral response. We are developing a library having a spectral response of different Earth surface features, either vegetation or water or any kind of other feature. Then construct the spectral curve for relatively pure pixels. Then out of entire spectral library, we will select the pure spectral curve for each object, because it may be some spectral response, they may have some errors. So you need to construct pure spectral curve out of your entire spectral library. Then you need to specify the reflectance peak and absorption to the reads from the curve. Then compare the lab spectra. You can compare the image spectra with the spectra measured in the lab. Okay, and for getting the mixture analysis, then mixtures of 2 or even 3 different materials can be identified as the components of the compound spectral curve. So these are some general approach. These are some general steps involved in the hyperspectral data analysis. I will discuss one by one. What is spectral library? What is pure pixels? What is this mixture analysis, unmixture analysis? Okay. So here, first we need to develop spectral libraries. So spectral libraries are the set of hundreds of measured spectra. Spectra is the plural form of spectrum. Okay. Spectra is the plural form of spectrum. So spectral library includes hundreds of spectra, because we are having 100 number of bands, 200 number of bands. So definitely we are having hundreds or 200 number of spectral reflectance for components likely to be encountered in the study area. So here you can see we are using iron oxide and hydroxide. So for iron oxide, it may have different spectral curve. Okay, for and for this hydroxide, for iron oxide, we are having different kinds of spectral curve. So depending on this spectral curve, you can easily come to know that what kind of mineral is there. So this information, this spectral curve is stored in the form of spectral library. Spectral library means we are generating the spectral curve, and that curve will be saved. That's why it is known as library. Means we are collecting the spectra, we are collecting the spectral response of different objects for creating our library, so that we can compare this information with the ground data to validate our result, whether we are identifying the same mineral or different mineral. Okay, so this is the generation of the spectral library. Spectral library is the collection of the hundreds of the measured spectra for components likely to be encountered in the study area. Okay, so spectral library generation includes the utilization of different softwares, the ground truth sites plotted on CASI image mosaics, noise reduction of the imagery in NV software. We can use NV software for generating the spectral library, having two methods, MNF and PPI procedures. Spectrally pure pixels are isolated in the imagery which coincide with the ground truth sites, and the here it is important to know spectrally pure pixels. Okay, when you are collecting the spectral response, sometimes we may not get pure pixels, we may not get spectral response of the pure pixels. In that case, we need to identify spectrally pure pixels. Means pure pixels means the pixel showing only a specific object, it's not mixed with other objects. That is known as spectrally pure pixels, and it is isolated in the imagery, and which can be then matched with the ground truth information. Okay, and the reflectance value for each band are extracted for pure pixels to create the spectral signatures. After identifying the pure pixels, now we can create spectral signatures that can be used for the classification, that can be used for the mapping of different features. Okay, so spectral library generation is an important component. It is a basic and one of the most important component in hyperspectral data analysis. You need to first create a spectral library, and out of a spectral library you need to select pure pixels, and on the basis of pure pixels you can get the spectral signatures for a particular object on the basis of that pure pixel of that object. Otherwise there will be the mixing, so you will not get the accurate information about different kinds of minerals and species of the vegetation and forest. So yeah, here this is the spectral signature of the vegetation. So this curve is showing the spectral signature of 3 different types of vegetation: grass, wetland, DBL, and tree. So here you see the spectral response, difference in the spectral response. So in case of grass, okay, in case of grass, in visible, all are having absorption. Here 500, 600, 700. From 500 to 700 nanometer, it's a visible portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. As all we know that in visible portion, vegetation doesn't reflect more and most of the energy is absorbed. But once it is studied in the NIR band, in NIR you can see there is a high reflectance. But that reflectance is also dependent on the type of the vegetation. Grass is having less reflectance in comparison to the tree. Trees are having higher reflectance in NIR. Grass is having low reflectance in the NIR. That's because of the leaf type, leaf size. Okay, trees are having uh, broader leaves. That's why it is having higher reflectance. Grass is having very small leaves. Grass is a very small kind of vegetation. It's a kind of small trees, bushes. So it is having less reflectance because their tree structure is very small. Their leaf size is very small. Okay, so tree is having higher reflectance because of their leaf size, because of their internal chlorophyll content. The leaves of the trees are large, so it will have more chlorophyll content. That's why tree is having higher reflectance in comparison to the grassland. Okay, so on the basis of the spectral signature, on the basis of the spectral response, you can also categorize different types of vegetation. Okay, so this is the spectral signature or spectral library. So here one, two, three spectral libraries for the three different types of vegetation. So we need to store this kind of spectral information in terms of in the form of spectral library, and that can be used to discriminate vegetation types, different types of vegetation, different species of the forest and other objects. Okay, this is the spectral signature of the vegetation. Here, when we are talking about the water bodies, in case of water bodies, the spectral signature of water bodies may be different for different kinds of water. Okay, we know that water absorbs most of the radiation coming from the sun. Okay, but if there is a clear water, then only it absorbs all the radiation. But if water is having some turbidity, if water is having some contamination, then it will reflect something. Okay, so in case of water, water always appears black in your satellite images because water absorbs total radiation incident on that water surface, water body. Okay, but this is the case of clear water only. If there is a clear water, if there is a clear and deep water, so that it can absorb all the radiation that is coming from the sun, that's why it appears as pure black. But in case of some turbidity, in case of some contamination, in case of some other pollutants in the water, so it will not reflect, it will not absorb, although it will reflect some part of the electromagnetic radiation. Here you see blue line. This blue means clear water. It is a pond, okay, or you can say water. So in case of clear water, it absorbs all the incoming radiation, whether in visible or near infrared. Okay, but if there is some mixing, suppose you have seen in some cases water is having some phytoplankton. Phytoplankton is a type of vegetation cover over the water. Okay, if the water surface, if the water body is covered by phytoplankton, that's a kind of vegetation. So in that case, water doesn't absorb all the radiation and it will reflect some information, it will reflect some radiation. That's why in case of this vegetated surface water, if there is a phytoplankton over the water, it will have reflectance in an IR, whereas in case of clear water, it absorbs all the radiation coming from the sun. And if there is a mud, if there are some turbidity, if there are some sediments and some organic or inorganic materials in the water bodies, so it may have some reflectance in comparison to the clear water. So water type can also be studied by using spectral signature, by analyzing the spectral response of that water feature. Okay, So this is all about the spectral signature of water bodies. Water is a object that is dominantly available over the Earth surface. Okay, and it's very easy to identify water bodies because it always appears as a black tone on the satellite images, but only in case of clear water. If it is not clear water, then it will have some kind of reflectance, so that it will not appear as a black. It will have some bluish tone. It will have some other different type of tone. So you can also study the water quality by analyzing its spectral signature, by analyzing its spectral response in hyperspectral remote sensing. Okay, spectral angle, the distance measured used for the spectral screening, the distance or the angle between the spectral response of two bands, suppose band 1 and band 2, is known as spectral angle. Means how much a reflectance in band 1 and how much reflectance in band 2, and the angle between the reflectance values of band 1, band 2, or any other bands is known as spectral angle. A spectral angle is used to analyze the separation of two bands. If two bands are having different reflectance, they are having very much difference in the spectral reflectance, then its angle will be large. If two bands having similar type of reflectance pattern, similar type of reflectance values, then their angle will be less. So depending on the spectral angle, we come to know that what is the difference between two spectral responses from two different bands. Okay, so for 2 pixels, we can calculate the spectral band. That spectral angle is computed using this formula, and on the basis of this formula, we come to know that whether two spectral bands are having similar values or different values. This is all about the spectral bands. So hyperspectral data analysis, another important component of hyperspectral data analysis is pure pixel analysis. So first you need to create spectral libraries, but out of all the spectral libraries, you need to find the relatively pure pixels. Okay, because sometimes you may have similarities of two different spectral bands or two different spectral libraries. So you need to identify the relatively pure pixel, and this is known as pixel purity index. Pixel purity index tells us the quality of the pixel. Pixel purity index will tell us the purity of the pixel, how much pure pixel we are collecting from the library, spectral library. Okay, pure pixel means that pixel should represent a specific object. If we are talking about vegetation, so that pixel should represent only the vegetation. If we are talking about water bodies, that pixel should only represent the water bodies. It's not like that the same pixel is having the properties of both the objects, vegetation and this water bodies. So it may cause some error in the image analysis. It may cause some error in the image classification. The pure spectra are spectral end members. These pure pixels can be considered as the spectral end members. Now, these pure pixels can be used to create the spectral signatures. That spectral signatures will be used for further analysis and further classification of the satellite images. That is known as end members. Pure pixel, after applying the pixel purity index, we come to know that pure pixels, okay, and that pure pixels, the collection of that pure pixels or the spectral signature of that pure pixels are considered as the end members. Okay, so end members are the purest pixels that can be used for further analysis, further classification of your light images. Now, spectral data analysis is also having important component. Spectral mixture analysis means if you are getting a spectral response of two objects that are very similar to each other, that comes to rise the error that is known as mixture. Spectral mixture means two pixel values may be mixed with each other. To avoiding this problem or to solve this problem, we apply spectral mixture analysis. Spectral mixture analysis unmix the pure pixels. If you are getting confused by the same spectral response of two pixels of two different objects, So you need to apply spectral mixture analysis. In short, we call it as a SMA, and it can be used to unmix the pure pixels, or it may be used to unmix the confusion or similarity between the pixel values of two objects. It assumes that the reflectance spectrum that is derived from the sensor can be deconvolved into the linear mixture of the spectra of ground component. It may be linear and non-linear. Linear spectral mixture analysis assumes the linear relationship between the reflectance and the area, whereas the non-linear spectral mixture analysis considers the non-linear relationship between the spectral reflectance and different or surface features. Okay, but I am not going in detail of this spectral mixture analysis. This is another topic, and this is a very broad topic, so it will not possible to cover this spectral mixture analysis in 1 or 2 lectures. Okay, so I'm not going in detail. You just see the linear mixture model, each pixel having vector x that can be described using this formula, whereas is the matrix of the spectra. Okay, by solving this problem, by solving this model or equation, you can easily unmix the mixing of the pixels. Linear spectral mixing. Okay, linear spectral mixing unmix the pixels that are very close to each other in terms of spectral response. Okay, so this is the linear mixture model. Formula is there. So hyperspectral sensors are now available. As I have discussed, Hyperion. Hyperion was launched in 2000 by NASA. Okay, and it is having 222 channels, that is ranging from 400 to 200, 500 nanometer. Its ground resolution is around 30 meters. Okay, but right now this sensor is not working, this is not in service, but you can get the images of these sensors in past years, means up to 2012 up to 2030 you can get the Hyperion images free of cost. But right now it is not providing the images. This is the sensor which is not in the function in the current time. Okay, it was very useful hyperspectral sensor, and it provided the data up to the year of 2012 or 2013. Okay, this is the sample image of the hyperspectral sensor, or you can say Hyperion sensor. This is sample image of the Hyperion sensor. Hyperion sensor provides you very good hyperspectral image in terms of spectral resolution. It is having 222 spectral bands. That's why its spectral resolution is 222. Its spatial resolution is also very good, having 30-meter spatial resolution. So it is very much comparable with the Landsat data sets. So most of the person use Hyperion as a complementary information providing to the Landsat data set, that is multispectral data. So you can use multispectral and hyperspectral both together to get better accuracy for getting better information in terms of spatial, spectral, and other information. Okay, so this is the future hyperspectral sensors that are planning to be designed. Okay, so its name is SOC 700. It's not a spaceborne sensor, it's a ground-based sensor. Okay, it will be used on the ground for getting the information about the spectral response of different Earth surface feature. Okay, and its dynamic range is around 12 bit. Its data will be of 12 bit. Okay, and its spectral band is between 0.43 to 0.9 microns, and it is having total number of bands 120 up to 480. This hyperspectral sensor having the number of bands starting from 120 and 480 depending on different configuration. For one configuration it will have total number of bands 120. For different configuration it will have total number of bands that is 240, and for third type of configuration it will have the total number of bands that is around 480. So this is the future hyperspectral sensor, but it is not a spaceborne sensor. It can be used on the ground-based platform. So here you see the figure. This is the sensor that is mounted on the ground-based platform, and it will be used to collect the spectral response of any object. Here you see here it's a lab photograph. and there is a vegetation, there is a small vegetation tree, and it is using for getting the spectral response of this vegetation. Okay, so but right now Indian government is also planning to launch a hyperspectral sensor in 2022 that will provide us the hyperspectral images by that Indian satellite, but very soon they are going to launch. Okay, so as we know that hyperspectral remote sensing is having wider application for discriminating different objects, for discriminating different types of forest, different types of vegetation, but still there are several limitations also. The first and important limitation is data volume. As I have already discussed that it provides us the data in different wavelengths like 222 to 240 wavelength bands. Okay, so this creates the large volume of the data, large data volume. Because of the more number of bands, it will have the large data volume. So it is not easy to store this much of large data volume. You need to have good storage capacity for storing this large volume of the data set. Cost is there, cost factor is there, because most of the hyperspectral sensors are not freely available. So you need to purchase, you need to have some fund to purchase that data set. So cost is another limitation of hyperspectral remote sensing. Then third type of limitation is the difficulty in analysis. Okay, so spectral libraries, the creation of spectral libraries are not much easy. So you need to be very precise, you need to be very accurate when you are going to create spectral libraries. You need to collect the purest pixel out of all the available spectral libraries. Okay, sometimes you will be get confused by the spectral response of different objects. Okay, so spectral library generation is not easy task. It's a little bit difficult, but once you will be successful in creating spectral libraries, that spectral library will be very much useful for future studies, for getting the information about different Earth surface feature, for getting the information about different objects around the globe. Okay, and more complexity is also there, as I discussed that with more number of spectral bands, more complexity will be there. Complexity in terms of end member selection, pixel purity index, how you can get the pure pixels out of entire spectral library. Okay, if you are having large number of data sets, large number of spectral information, so out of that spectral information, it is very not easy to collect or to select the pure pixels. So complexity is also there. So to avoid this complexity, we can apply spectral mixture analysis. Spectral mixture analysis is used to solve the complexities of the mixing of the pixels. Sometimes you will get the mixed pixels. Sometimes you will get the spectral response of two objects that are very close, very similar to each other. That will be the kind of spectral mixing. You need to unmix the mixed pixels to get the improved information, to get the better and accurate information about the objects that is considered as the pixel purity index or pure pixels. Okay, so this is the hyperspectral remote sensing, how it works, what are the limitations, what are the characteristics of the data sets, and it is also very much useful for different kinds of planning activities, different kinds of mapping activities. But only limitation is the data availability. So if the data is available, the data is available from different hyperspectral sensors, then definitely it will be very much useful in comparison to the multispectral data sets. So this is the a very useful technique. This is very useful remote sensing technique nowadays, and in future the utilization of hyperspectral remote sensing will be improved, will be increased depending on the availability of different data sets. Okay, so this is all about the hyperspectral remote sensing. If any one of you have any question, then you can ask your queries, your questions, and your quiz will be uploaded on your LMS. You need to attempt your quiz on the LMS related to this today's lecture. Thank you very much.